We are going to begin the funeral service for Mr. Brian Izen. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone to please, if you have your phone with you, to place it in the silent mode or turn it completely off at this time. I also like to welcome friends and extended family who are here for the family via live stream. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the family for attending the service. Services will be conducted by Rabbi Lisa Bellows and Rabbi Richard Prass at Congregation Beth Am in Buffalo Grove. At this time, I would ask that everyone please rise in silent prayer as we escort the family into the chapel.
Danielle, Kyle, Lucas, Joe, Leslie, Rita, Renee, Jayke, Mikayliah, McKinsey, Robert, Staci, Rebecca, Kyle, Steve, family, and dear friends. We should not have to be here. This is so heartbreaking and so wrong. There is nothing about Brian's death that makes sense. How we so desperately want to turn back time. We ache at this loss. And we show up. Because Brian showed up to life and to each one of us. So with courage, we come and we take our seats or our place on live stream, and we do what we never thought we could or should have to. We say goodbye to, and we celebrate Brian's life. Family has asked me to offer this on their behalf. Heaven needed an angel, and God had sent for you. You're gone from me forever. Now what am I to do? I miss you now like never before, but I have to let go. I have to let you go. I will never forget you, and this I need you to know. My heart, it broke with sadness for the one that I adore. When our Heavenly Father sent for you, He must have needed you more. Goodbye until we meet again. In my heart, you'll always be, for always you will remain my sweetest memory. Adonai ma'adam v'tida'ehu, bein enosh v'techashavehu. Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. Would that we were wise, that we understood where we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace.
Death has taken our beloved Brian. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is great lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness, lost in their sorrow. May they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Brian's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues to the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we often listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that bring us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. No text has been more with our people in this time of darkness than the 23rd Psalm. In it, we read, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear." We wish we weren't here in this valley, in this low place. And to the family and the many dear friends, as you walk through this valley right now, perhaps this psalm teaches us and reminds us that you are not alone. You each are loved individually and collectively. The countless memories that you build in so many ways are here with you because Brian was the community mensch and because of all that you have created together. And so when we recite Psalm 23, we affirm the promise of synagogue community, neighborhood, countless neighborhood communities, family and friends, that you are not alone. Adonai roi lo achsar binotesha yarbitseni al me menuchot yanchileni nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni b'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. If you'd like to join with me in the English of the 23rd Psalm, you'll find it on the inside of the leaflet. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Brian was a memory maker. From childhood friends to adult friends, from work to family, from neighborhood to congregation, to so many other touch points, Brian was a memory maker that will be truly missed. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, his memories too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember him. Source of life, author of all existence, we call upon you as our loving creator. You summon us unto life. You sustain and guide us to the very end. Our lives are often filled with suffering and pain, but your light is not entirely hidden from our eyes. You are indeed our light and our hope. In this hour of parting from our beloved Brian, we cherish those few years that were allotted to him. Though they were too few, they were a source of blessing for many. We thank you, God, for the life that has issued from him. May courage and wisdom be granted to his sorrowing wife, that she may be a source of strength and comfort. May Brian's spirit live on as a precious memory and influence in the hearts of all her dear ones. May all who are bowed in grief find comfort in you, O God, who are near your children, in sorrow as in joy, in death as in life. Adonai Natan, v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach.
An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave and that there is strength in faith. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, we read that there is a time for every purpose. There is a time to keep silent and a time to speak. Lucas, do you feel up to coming to read what you wrote?
Here's what I will miss about my dad. When I drop my clothes and I don't hang them up, my dad would always yell at me to hang them up with him when I never wanted to. We would always show up to sports games like 2 hours early to 1 hour early to get bobbleheads, and then he let me go with the away team to meet some of the players, and then taking photos of us wherever we want, even if I did not want to. And taking the sports events.
Cousin Staci Klein.
You guys are gonna have to bear with me. I'm gonna try to get through this, but I promise we'll do this together. Brian, there are a handful of people that I think are truly dynamic. And my cousin Brian is one of those people. People gravitate to him. He made everyone he met feel like family. And I always envied his sense of humor. His sense of humor is why I think he has so many friends. And he has a wicked sense of humor, and I mean that literally and figuratively. Some of his pranks were pretty wicked. I have so many stories and happy memories of Brian. I really found it difficult to pick the ones that I want to share with you today. I think I have more stories about Brian than anybody else in our family. I would bet that many of you could probably say the same thing as me. So instead of a top 10 list or an ode to Brian, I call this the best of Brian Izen. And it's lengthy, so get comfortable. I'm going to start with memories from their townhouse. I don't know if you guys knew this, but they had a Barbie record player. You remember that, right? And we would play that record player and just dance around all the time with that Barbie record player. And then Brian loved my strawberry shortcakes. I mean, he loved them so much, he sniffed them so much, I think he developed an allergy to it. And I don't know if you remember the big stairs in their townhouse. As a kid, it seemed like it went on forever. I don't know, maybe as an adult it wouldn't seem as long, but we used to slide down on our bellies and see who could get down the fastest, like penguins. And we would have bruises, but we didn't care because it was fun. And then Lesley would always record. Do you remember recording the Friday night videos? She would record them, and when we would spend the night, she would play them on the VCR, just like, I don't know if you see the show The Goldbergs, but at the beginning of that show, that VCR, they had that exact same VCR. And we would just dance to Friday night videos. And I remember Brian watching Svengoolie with Uncle Winkle. And Clara Peller, if you don't know who that is, he loved that woman. She was the Where's the Beef? I mean, if you know Brian, that's probably one of your memories of him walking around going, where's the beef? Cheeseburger is only 59 cents, you know. And Lesley would save all those McDonald's wrappers, and he would play McDonald's. Like, he would re-wrap it up, and you would have to go to his drive-thru, and he would serve you McDonald's. Speaking of food, when we would spend the night at Leslie's, we would stay up really late, like after Joe and Lesley went to sleep. And Brian would make what he called concoctions. And he called it eat or die, and you would have to close your eyes and guess what the ingredients were. It was pretty funny. And I'm sure everybody's experienced this one. Getting screenshots of restaurants near where you live that have excellent Yelp reviews, you know, because he might want to try it and go there when he visits you. He knew where to get the best food. Brian was always up for a good time, especially vacations. And there's so many vacations, I'm only picking a couple to share with you. If you want to talk with me later about more, I'll be glad to do that. The best part of going with Brian is that he plans the whole thing for you with an itinerary. You don't have to do anything. He'll find the best parking, the best deals, the best food, etc. He makes vacationing with him a breeze. He actually took me on my first Disney trip and with Rita. And I mean, he took care of everything. I didn't have to worry about anything. And I'm a nervous person, so that is really helpful when you have anxiety. And the trip wouldn't have been complete without a few pranks. I absolutely hate roller coasters. They make me sick to my stomach, and I just hate them. And so he would pull pranks on me while we were there. I don't know if you're familiar with Disney, but they have the People Mover, which is the slowest ride in Disney, right? So we're sitting on the People Mover, and he turns to Rita and I, and he goes, I forgot to tell you, there's a drop at the end of this. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. He's laughing, that big laugh he did. He thought it was so funny. That's one of my favorites. And then also, of course, when you go on a trip with him, even if we're going to Disney, he still had to go to a Miami Heat game, which is not close. It's still like a 4-hour drive. So we had to rent a car, go all the way down to the Miami Heat game. And if you've ever driven with Brian, he gets a little distracted. The ride alone was an adventure, but I won't get into that. So that was our trip to Disney. Our most recent trip that I have of our memory was, it was right before Mikayliah decided to go to Iowa. Brian and I both went to Iowa, and Robbie too. And we decided to go back and visit. We went to a game, and of course we had to take the Hawkeye Express, because Brian loved trains. And my kids have that memory. I'm glad that they got to take a vacation with him and experience a vacation with Brian. There are so many vacation stories, but I need to move this along. Another thing we did, Brian and I went to so many concerts together. Ones I'm sure many of you would scoff at, like the Backstreet Boys. He's the only one that would go to those cheesy concerts with me. He loved them. And we took Lesley and my mom, and we were in our late 20s when we did that. And there's all these 14-year-old girls, and we're towering over them. We're like, we can't see. And Brian and I are like, be quiet. Just having a great time. The Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Mariah Carey. He wasn't afraid what you thought about his taste in music or movies or anything. I mean, he loved a good Golden Girls episode. Or the Sex and the City movies. I don't know if you guys remember this, but he was the only guy in the theater that went with us to go see that movie when it came out. He didn't care that men wanted nothing to do with that movie. Here are a few of his more wicked pranks that he pulled on my grandparents that are my favorites. When I graduated from, I don't know, it was high school or college, my mom was getting the catering from this place called Murray's Catering. And I don't know how he found that out. We live an hour south, right? I don't know how he knew she was getting food from Murray's Catering. But that's when they had answering machines, and he left a message on her machine saying, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Bielsker, but we're all out of white meat for your party tonight. We're going to have to serve all dark meat. So my mom calls up Murray and starts berating him, and he finally says, ma'am, I have no idea what you're talking about. We have plenty of white meat for your party tonight. And she knew immediately. She's like, oh, Brian, right? He used to do some wicked pranks on my grandparents. Like, one of my favorites is right when Costco's first opened. Do you remember when we went? We went to Costco, and my grandmother had macular degeneration, so she couldn't really see. She could only see out of the sides a little bit. And she decided to sit in one of those scooters. And then she decided she didn't want to go around the store. So she sat in the front. And she couldn't see, but Brian would go up behind her and press the forward button. And she would be like, what? And she wouldn't be able to see that it was him doing that. And this is another favorite. When my grandparents moved to their condo, there was this fountain out front. And if you know anything about my grandfather, you know he didn't have very much of a sense of humor. And Brian had a huge sense of humor, right? So we pull up, and Brian says to my grandfather, "Hey, Poppy, look, you can go swimming in that fountain." And he looked at him like, "Oh, my God, you're such an idiot." And Brian got really offended by that, but I thought it was hilarious. He would call my grandparents just to mess with them. Like, we went to Iowa together, like I said earlier, and he called them up one time and said, "Hi, this is the Iowa City Police Department, and we are holding Staci, and she couldn't get a hold of her parents, so you're her one phone call." And they're panicking, and then he's like, "Oh, just kidding, you know." I have so many of those pranks that he pulled on my grandparents. I can't even finish all of them. And then Brian could make the best out of a really awful situation. When we were in college, he called me one day and he said, "I'm having horrible stomach pains and he thinks he should go to the ER." And I said, "Yeah, probably partied too hard, take an Advil, drink some water, take a nap, call me later." And he's like, "No, I think this is an emergency." So he convinced me. And they ended up doing an ultrasound and discovered that he needed his gallbladder removed. So we were looking at the ultrasound picture together, just the two of us. We're like, what? Like 19, 18, I don't even remember what we were. And we're looking at the ultrasound picture together and noticed a big dark spot. And we asked, "What is that?" And this one, you know, she's from Iowa. She's like, "Oh, babe, that's a patty." And we're like, "What?" And she's like, she meant that was like a BM forming. So we cracked up. Like, even when he was in a lot of pain, he was able to laugh and like make a joke. And the gallbladder surgery is what led to the discovery of his failing kidneys, and we all know that story. In fact, Brian was so brave that when he had both kidney surgeries, I was a blubbering mess, and he looked at me like, "Calm down, I got this," right? He always looked on the bright side, and that's so admirable. I could honestly go on for hours with stories about my cousin Brian. He was so much more to me than a cousin. He was like a brother and a best friend. What a legacy, right? What a life. I invite you all to keep Brian alive in your hearts. We were touched by his presence, and we are better because of that. Thank you for making Brian's life so meaningful. There will be a little less laughter in this world without him, but I'm sure he is pulling pranks on my grandparents as we speak. Thank you.
Lucas and Staci, what an honor to hear your words, to receive them. A little bit more. Brian grew up in Wilmette and went to New Trier, and he played football, and he went to Hebrew school, which he didn't much care for. But that changed as he grew up. And after the kidney transplants, because he found comfort at Temple, and he and Danielle found Beth Am, they took to it and to the community, and he got involved, and they brought their friends. And Lucas started wanting to do Shabbat, so Brian took his lead, and he and Danielle and Kyle and Lucas found a spiritual home. And I offer, on behalf of all of us at Beth Am, which in English means house of the people, that Brian made the house of the people much more fun, more joyful, and more blessed. Brian was a healthy kid, but at around 19 or 20, he found out, as Staci shared, that his kidneys were failing. He was so well liked at Chase, one friend, Kyle Liebich, donated his kidney to Brian. Brian, always a trooper and such a positive person. All went well initially, and despite being on some heavy-duty medication and having a rough time post-kidney transplant. He never once complained. He embraced life and lived it. When the kidney started to fail again, Brian was graced with a friend in Steve Pagano, who gave him the second kidney. And at first it didn't work, but then it did. And Kyle absolutely gave an additional life to Brian, who lived it to the fullest. Kyle and Steve did that. There's a poem called The Dash that Leslie mentioned the other day, and it speaks about what we do between the date of our birth and the date of our death. Brian filled every moment between those dashes with a love for life and a love for his family, friends, and clients. When Brian's Chase branch heard the news of Brian's passing, they closed. 50 people or more came from different Chase branches to get together and come and talk about Brian, and the branch is closed today. Brian started working at Chase right out of college. He started at the Highland Park Dominic's as a bank teller, and he is still friends with the Highland Park people he worked with 20 years ago. Now, Brian would always gather people in, no matter who. Once you met Brian, you had a friend for life. It didn't matter who you are or who you were or what you did, he brought you in. And Brian was great at what he did. Customers sought him out. There are some laughs, too, when we think of Brian at Chase. You just need to say the word stamp or I'm going to be sick, and it brings a smile. Brian brought a smile. Brian was at Chase for about 9 or 10 years when Danielle met him. He was already a branch manager. She remembers that he was like a doctor on call, checking a pager. Always, even on vacation, Brian would look at his phone for messages from clients. He was checking on them. He was checking on the branch. He was devoted. He was special at the bank because there was nothing he wouldn't do. So he expected a lot from those who worked with him. Over the course of these last few days, Danielle has heard stories from people who worked with Brian. They told her things like, I am where I am today because Brian pushed me to be a better person. Clients from years ago say to Leslie and Joe, your son is the best manager. When at another branch, every time Robbie would show his ID with the Izen name, every person told him that Brian had been someone important to them. Well, Brian wasn't only close to his employees, he was so close to his customers. He did for them. He even joined the Jewish Bowling League and made Robbie join too. He felt connected to the clients and his coworkers, and they to him. If you met Brian, you just loved him. Brian had a magic touch. He was respected and loved at the very same time. Also, as mentioned, if you knew Brian, you knew that he had a love for sports. So much so that he sometimes would make Joe and Robbie nuts about this. And now we understand from Lucas too. Their vacations were baseball park vacations, managing to visit each park except Seattle. He collected bobbleheads as a kid, those foam fingers. Brian also loved Disney World. He was a Disney maven. He knew everything about the park, what to do, where to go. He first went when he was 5 years old and was hooked. And although in general he was the slowest walker there was, when it came to Disney World, it was impossible to keep up with him. Mickey Mouse was a love of his thing. Brian had his retirement place picked out Disney World. It was one of his happy places. When his niece Mikayliah was 4, Brian and she looked all over Disney World one day for Mickey Mouse, and alas, they had to leave the park with mission not yet accomplished. And just as they were walking out of the park, Kayla saw Mickey, turned Brian's head to see, and wow, just like that, goal completed. Mickey was seen and waved to, and Brian was thrilled to have a little kid with him so it wouldn't be so embarrassing. Whether at Disney or touring ballparks, Brian would always look for restaurants to go to and what they were serving. Wherever they went, actually, he would know where to go for what to eat. And in Chicago, Brian knew where the place to go. Brian's friends always asked him for restaurant recommendations, and he always came up with the answer. Brian made everything an adventure. Growing up, Brian and Robbie would create things. They would love to let their parents go out on a Saturday night and then bring friends in from the backyard. They would cook up a storm. He always planned an adventure with Robbie, and he was, particularly, as Staci shared, not above being a prankster. Pranks at home as kids or in college at the Dells, with roller coaster rides, the People Mover in Disney World, plastic bug lookalikes on the bed, stink bombs, a refreshing cup of milk with an added surprise of horseradish. He was a great prankster, and he loved to laugh. And while we might not have laughed at the time, we laugh and smile when remembering this side of Brian. Danielle met Brian at a party for Len's 30th birthday. Danielle, friends with Lori, Brian of Len's, the sole purpose of that party was to introduce Danielle and Brian to each other. They met on May 20th, and as the story goes, on June 1st, Danielle's luggage was at Brian's condo. Brian and Danielle had a great love affair, and the depth of their love is truly beyond measure. He did everything for her and the boys. He almost never said no, and he brought happiness with him everywhere. Danielle's favorite part of the day is when he would come home from work. On their bedroom wall hangs a picture that says, "Love rules, listen to your heart, kiss each other goodnight, run away together, say I love you, be thoughtful and generous, respect each other, laugh together every day, hold hands and cuddle, never go to bed angry, grow old together. Remember why you fell in love, live happily ever after." Danielle and Brian lived by these rules, and there is a tremendous ache in the heart that the one and only rule broken was to grow old together. With Danielle's permission, I share her words posted yesterday. My love, your life touched so many. Your infectious smile, your storytelling, and your zest for life made people gravitate to you. Always willing to help anybody and everybody. Your Chase branch actually shut down yesterday because the news of your passing hit those that worked with you so hard. It closed, but then the men and women that have worked for you or with you over the past 20 years all sat and told stories about you. That's the impact you had on so many. You were my love, my best friend, and my everything, and you always will be. You gave me the best 15 years of my life, the belly laughs, the late night talks, and the love we had for each other was what made you my everything. You made life an adventure, and I was so lucky to be a part of it all. The boys love you and miss you already so terribly. Luke already asked who's going to get him Jersey Mike's on Tuesdays. Funny how those little things you did made such a huge impact. Kyle is trying so hard to be brave. He slept next to me last night and rubbed my back as I wept. You were always so proud of your boys, and they loved you so much. My love, I haven't figured out how I'm going to continue life without you, but I know you'll be my tour guide from the sky. I love you, Beeps. Together, Danielle and Brian made a strong team, and their boys, Kyle and Lucas, are so lucky to have Brian as their dad. He would do and did do anything for them. He taught them to love sports and adventures too. He would find any event for their boys, and their friends were always included. He knew it all. He had it going and doing down to a science, and he showed the boys what it means to live a full life. He gave them so many experiences and opportunities. He was the best dad. He would take Kyle and Lucas to sports games and was always clever and determined to get autographs. He found out where the players were so he could meet them. He got the boys onto Jumbotron and Kyle's name on that humongous monitor. He would get to the park, as Lucas so well reminded us, 2 hours early to visit the opponent's side so the boys might have more autographs or pick up a hockey puck or a chance meeting. Friends and family, there are literally countless engaging and precious memories of Brian. Danielle and the entire family would love to hear yours. If you're planning to attend one of the Shivas, please bring your story with you on a piece of paper. And there'll be a box you can place the story, your memory of Brian, for the family to treasure today and forever. If you are not at Shiva, email or snail mail or post them to the family. Brian leaves us a lasting legacy of love and how to experience joy. Family was everything to Brian. And lastly, most recently, when Rita, who was like a second mom to Brian, went with him and the boys to the movie saw that it was sold out, Brian was determined to stay until it wasn't. They saw the movie, and Lucas said, "This was the best day of my life." Brian made it so that Lucas and Kyle had countless opportunities to say, "This was the best day of my life." Brian made sure that everyone was taken care of. And now, family, you will take care of each other, and you will let us help take care of you. Brian gathered all of us into one family. Each time we do for each other, so Brian lives, not in the way we want him to, but in the way that he can. Brian was precious and good, and this is such a sad day. May Brian's name and memory be for blessing and live within us always. Amen. I'll ask those who are able to rise and offer of a prayer just for Brian that asks God to receive him with great tenderness and love. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע המזהירים, את נשמת ברוך עליון בן יוסף וליבי ברנדל שלח לעולמו. בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו. ינוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Brian Izen, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen.
Please be seated for a moment. This does conclude the service at the chapel. The interment will be private. It will be family only. The family will be sitting Shiva, a public Shiva, and that will be at the Izen residence, 681 Dunhill Drive in Buffalo Grove. That'll be today from 4 until 8, Saturday from 6 until 9, and Sunday 2 until 6. Weather permitting, the Shiva will be indoors and outdoors. That information is on our website as well, with the hours posted, so please take a look at that. Also on our website are places where you can leave the family a video message, or you can type a message directly to the family. We'll make sure that they receive any loving and caring notes from friends and family through our website. The following people have been selected to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please step forward. There'll be pallbearers here at the chapel only. Howie Burnett, Mark Schiff, Matthew Corbacus, Al Tamez, Scott Simo, Michael Klein, and Jeremy Dubin. At this time, I would ask that everyone please rise. Pallbearers, please step forward as the clergy and the family are escorted from the chapel. Pallbearers are going to have to come over here.
No, I don't want to leave me, please.